Part 24. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Se Nian Bai. Chapter 231. What on earth is this? Su Ming looked at the meat boils. He was a little confused and couldn't figure out what they were. He didn't dare to stew them for his mother. It looked quite disgusting, as if the pig had late-stage stomach cancer. After smelling it, I was surprised. Instead of the rancid smell I imagined, there was a faint fragrance in the smell of blood. My mother was playing mahjong, took a look at it, and said with a smile, "Take it and stew it, it's good stuff." It turns out that this has something to do with the wild boar's diet. Wild boars with thick fur and thick skin eat a variety of foods, including bamboo shoots, herbs, bird eggs, mushrooms, hares, mountain rats, venomous snakes and centipedes. They will eat anything they can, and they especially like to eat snakes. Since the plants it eats include a variety of pure natural Chinese herbal medicines, the wild boar's stomach is soaked in various Chinese herbal medicines for a long time. It has high medicinal value and is invulnerable to all poisons. This is very similar to the macaw. Just as the rooster is the nemesis of the centipede, the wild boar is the nemesis of the poisonous snake. After swallowing a poisonous snake, the poisonous snake's fangs may bite or hang the inner wall of the wild boar's stomach. The wild boar's stomach will produce granulation tissue in the wound, turning into the meat boils that Su Ming saw. Eating a snake will cause there is a certain chance of producing such a flesh boil. The more boils there are, the higher its medicinal value. It is perfect for preventing and treating joint rheumatism, gastrointestinal diseases, etc. There is even a saying that most of the wild boars that develop such flesh boils have eaten Ganoderma lucidum, because Ganoderma lucidum has a good detoxification effect. This statement has not been confirmed, but there are many wild Ganoderma lucidum in the mountains, and ordinary wild Ganoderma lucidum, such as Ganoderma lucidum, are not very valuable. It is entirely possible that wild boars are occasionally encountered and eaten. 1, 2, 3. Su Ming counted. There were actually 4 meat boils in the stomach of this little wild boar. Although this guy was not big, he seemed to have eaten it in his short life. Lots of venomous snakes. I heard the second uncle and the others talking about it. If you sell such a small pig belly, it is estimated to be worth thousands of dollars. If you have rheumatism, leg pain, and stomach problems, you will see immediate effects after eating it. The 2 little wild boars were all killed, and the other one also had a boil in its belly. The value was much lower in comparison, but it was still rare. Money is a bastard. My mother's health is the most important thing. Let's stew a belly first, and don't leave. After the stew is done, drink the soup in the morning and then go home and sleep. The humidity in the mountains is very high, and it is easy to get arthritis or something like that. Su Ming didn't care about tens of millions of dollars now. He left, took the 2 stomachs to the kitchen at the back, found some yams or something, and put them together to stew in a big pot. While making soup, I contacted Hai Dongqing through the ability of possessing souls. After the group of wild boars left, they actually ran a long way into the mountains, and Hai Dongqing followed them calmly in the sky. With Su Ming's current level of mental strength, this distance has almost reached the limit. He vaguely saw the second senior brother and a large group of subordinates walking towards the depths of the mountain, and he didn't know where they were going. Seeing that their mental power was about to be disconnected due to the distance, Su Ming and Hai Dongqing said hello, follow them. Hai Dongqing's wings fluttered in response, and he followed Su Ming. His eyes looked like an old black and white TV. The picture gradually blurred, with large patches of snowflakes appearing, and the connection was completely interrupted. My mental strength is still not strong enough. Su Ming thought that when he returned to Yangchuan City, the first thing he would do was to ask the Monkey King and the others to brew monkey wine as soon as possible to continue to strengthen their mental power. If my mental strength reaches a certain level, wouldn't I be able to see the White House directly from Yangchuan City? Su Ming thought a little proudly. To be a bit exaggerated, in theory, as long as the mental power is strong enough, you can even monitor every corner of the earth. Of course, this is just a thought. Even with the help of monkey wine, it is impossible for his mental strength to be this strong until the day he dies. After a night of silence, the old rooster Kwewa next door started to caw, and the weather gradually became cooler. The smell of pig belly soup came from the back kitchen. The people in the main room played mahjong all night, and they were all a little tired. Suddenly smelled the fragrance wafting out, and my spirit was shocked. While shuffling the cards, the second aunt said with a smile, "Let me just say that Su Ming doesn't have to worry about finding a partner. How many of these young men can cook in the kitchen? Look, Su Ming can just make a soup and cook it." My mouth is watering with greed. On the one hand, Su Ming's cooking skills are indeed passable, and the ingredients this time are also quite good. On the other hand, everyone first drove wild boars and played cards all night, so they were all really hungry. As soon as the aroma wafted out, of course everyone was people's greedy minds are all tempted. No more fighting, let's drink some soup and then go home. Su's mother pushed the mahjong and shouted to the kitchen behind, "Su Ming, take out the soup and scoop out a few more pieces of belly. There are still steamed buns on the stove. Steam it too." Su Ming had already steamed the buns and was about to serve the soup when the mother white cat crawled out of the nest, walked to the kitchen with kitten steps, stood up and lay on the edge of the stove, screaming at the top, a look of eager greed. Meow, meow, meow. Several newly born kittens, who are not very good at walking and haven't even opened their eyes, actually crawled behind the curtain on the opposite side and sniffed this way. A few of them were drooling. "Haha, I forgot about you. By the way, I just gave birth to a baby, and I have to breastfeed, so I need to drink some stomach soup to replenish my health." The stomach soup was like milk, white and thick. Su Ming first filled a small basin with half of it and walked towards the cat room next door. As soon as he entered the door, the big and small cats circled around his calves. The kittens stumbled as they walked, and fell while circling, and got up again after falling, just like a few little tumblers. "It's hot, drink slowly, don't fall into the basin. The soup in the basin, if you fall into it, at most you will become a drowned cat, but you won't drown." Su Ming blew a few times and estimated that the temperature was about right, then he put down the soup basin. The big and small cats immediately surrounded him in a large group, stretched out their tongues to the soup, and licked it wildly. After taking care of the cat family, Su Ming used a super large basin like a bathtub to fill a large basin of soup and brought it to the front hall. A dozen large bowls were stacked together. There are steamed buns on the stove in the back. If anyone wants to eat, take them. The sight of a large group of people eating breakfast together was quite spectacular. One person held a large bowl full of soup in one hand and a large steamed bun with red dots in the other. They squatted in a row on the door railing and several squatted on the chairs. The sound of slurping was everywhere. Not long after, a large pot of soup and more than 20 steamed buns were eaten up. Su Ming and Su Meng also had a happy meal. After breakfast, the card game was over and they went home to sleep. "I'll take a nap first. When I wake up, I'll go to the mountains to find the wild boars." Su Ming yawned and said to Su Meng. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 232. Mistake. I really shouldn't drink so much soup before going to bed. I slept until about 8 o'clock in the morning, and then I woke up. I didn't even put on any clothes. I rushed to urinate. Then I came back and jumped on the bed and crawled under the quilt to continue sleeping. At 10 o'clock, I woke up again. Was suffocated once. When it was almost noon, Su Ming was almost asleep and ready to get up. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Su Meng sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at him intently with his two big eyes open. "Why don't you just sleep and come to my bed without saying a word to scare people to death?" He, Su Meng raised his arm like a small iron pillar, clenched his fist and waved it hard several times. This guy suffered a big loss at the hands of wild boars last night. Although he was not seriously injured, he was trampled over by a group of wild boars as if they were a cushion, which was quite humiliating. He knew that Su Ming was going to find the group of wild boars in the mountains today. He had been holding back his energy for a long time. He lay in bed for 2 or 3 hours before getting up. He has been sitting here waiting for Su Ming to wake up. You keep staring at me like this, I feel like you are looking at me. Su Ming looked at Su Meng's somewhat red eyes and suddenly thought of the story about the old turtle looking at him. Legend has it that after the old turtle lays an egg, he will not go far, but will hide in a hidden place not far away and stare at his egg motionlessly until the egg hatches. It is said that sometimes the eyes of old turtles bleed from staring at the eggs for a long time without moving. Hey, Su Meng turned around and waved his fist again in the direction of the mountain. Yes, those wild boars are the turtle eggs. Let's go and blast those turtle eggs. Su Ming laughed, got dressed, and got out of bed. When Su Ming walked towards the mountains, several disaster-stricken households in the town had already begun to count the damage, and at the same time, they were opening up new land to replenish the number. They only waited for the statistics to be completed, and after everyone pressed their fingerprints to prove it, they were sent to the town, and the mayor reported to them. The county filed an application for compensation, and after the Chinese New Year, Liang Shi's classmate went to the countryside to investigate. After confirmation, the compensation process could begin. The mayor of Sun Town, whose surname is Wu, is almost 60 this year. He is not a local, but an educated youth who went to the mountains and countryside. At that time, after the educated youth went to the countryside, they had no idea that they would be able to return to the city one day, so many of them married local girls. Later, after the return to the city policy came out, some of the married people were transferred back. And some simply stay in the countryside. Mayor Wu has stayed in Suntown for more than 30 years. From being a clerk in the production brigade, he became the mayor of Suntown. He stayed in the mayor's position for 7 or 8 years. In some remote places in China, small cotters such as town chiefs and village chiefs are simply the local emperors and tyrants, but there are also some grassroots cotters who really serve the people diligently and want to make a fortune with their fellow villagers and work hard all their lives. All invested in building their hometown. Mayor Wu is the latter. For the sake of Suntown, old Wu has worked countless overtime shifts and how much money he has paid. In order to get some good treatment for the town, he has been punished by the county leaders many times. Criticize. It's a pity that the actual situation of the entire Moxie County is there. No matter how hard Lao Wu tries his best, he can't make Suntown rich. This can be regarded as a worry for Lao Wu. No, on the second day of the Lunar New Year, old Wu was not idle. He was in the mayor's office, talking with the boss from the city about attracting investment. Suntown is a town, but there are 3 villages below it. In fact, the scale is not as large as some larger villages, so the mayor's office is also quite simple. It is just a 2-story building. It is bigger than Su Ming's house. With 2 more there are 2 buildings across the courtyard, one is where Lao Wu and his family live, and the other one across the courtyard is for offices. If it weren't for the faded national flag hanging at the door, you wouldn't have known it was a government unit. Mr. Hong, I'm really sorry that I asked you to come here just for the Chinese New Year. Old Wu took a big red plastic bag from under his desk and said, "We don't have anything good here, just some winter bamboo shoots. You can take these local specialties back and try them." Mr. Hong is a middle-aged man in his 40s. He wears a pair of glasses and looks gentle. He looks more like a scholar than a businessman. He smiled politely. "Mayor Wu, you are too polite. I have been doing business for so many years and have given many gifts to leaders, but this is the first time a leader has given me something." "Hey, this is not a gift." Old Wu waved his hand and said with a smile, "Besides, as long as it can make the villagers make money and become rich, I can say anything. Mr. Hong, you also come to our Suntown to inspect. I've done it 3 times, what do you think? Suntown is of course a good place. It has beautiful mountains and clear waters and rich products. It is of course the best place to use it for breeding. It can definitely set up a large-scale pure natural wild boar breeding farm. Unexpectedly, the business that Mr. Hong and Mayor Wu discussed was actually related to wild boars, breeding wild boars. Mr. Hong took the initiative to raise wild boars. When Lao Wu heard about it, he agreed on the spot. Wild boars often come out to harm crops in the mountains, which means that there are a lot of wild boars in the nearby mountains. The surrounding environment must be very suitable for wild boars to survive. Old Wu has long been wondering whether he can turn the harm into a treasure, start with wild boars, and lead the villagers get rich. He also specifically researched the market and found that wild boars cannot be sold. They are protected animals by the state, and wild boars are actually not delicious. However, after the cross between wild boars and domestic pigs, the special wild boars produced are very popular on the market. Best-selling, the meat absorbs the advantages of domestic pigs and wild boars, and is rich in nutrients. 1 pound can be sold for 30 or 40 yuan, and the good ones can be sold for 50 yuan, and the price is relatively stable, unlike domestic pigs, which are scary when they are expensive and scary when they are cheap. Cry to death. In short, if you can raise them well, you can make a living. Mr. Hong said a few polite words first, then changed the subject and talked about business, but Mayor Wu, you also know that a large-scale breeding farm requires millions of investment. Yes, that's why I came to you, Mr. Hong. Everyone knows that you have a big business. Millions of dollars are nothing to you, but if you can build a breeding farm, then our Suntown will have a way out. A large breeding farm can first solve the employment problem of some residents of Suntown, and it is not a heavy physical job. Women and elderly people with flexible legs and feet in the town can do it, and young and strong people can still go out to work. In addition, Lao Wu specifically checked the wild boar meat market. At present, there are many people who specialize in raising wild boars in China, but the overall market demand is greater. As long as a breeding farm can be established, there will be no worries about sales. Of course, there are many technical details, but Lao Wu is not a breeding expert after all, but the mayor. His job is mainly to attract investment and find investment. Hearing Mayor Wu praising him for being rich, President Hong shook his head and smiled, and said with a hint of meaning, Mayor Wu, you have a big family and a lot of expenses. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 233. Old Wu smiled slightly, knowing that Mr. Hong was ready to negotiate terms, and nodded, Mr. Hong, if you can support it, our government will do our best to support it. As the head of a town, Old Wu naturally has his experience and government. Moreover, the county has been tricked by the so-called investment attraction more than once, and everyone at the top and bottom is on guard. Therefore, before inviting investment, Lao Wu deliberately investigated the young Mr. Hong. Mr. Hong has a catering company in the provincial capital, 2 large restaurants under his name, and some other industries, and is quite well known in the industry. Having an industrial background is the main reason why Lao Wu is willing to cooperate with Mr. Hong. Especially the 2 restaurants, Lao Wu personally inspected them on the spot. Although they were old, they were well run. Both the location and the interior decoration were top-notch. To put it bluntly, even if Mr. Hong has something fishy and runs away, the restaurants under his name cannot escape. The purpose of businessmen must be to make money. If Suntown cannot provide Mr. Hong with particularly good policy treatment, why would Mr. Hong invest here? So after hearing that Mr. Hong was starting to negotiate terms, Mayor Wu was not in a hurry and listened with a smile to what Mr. Hong was going to say. Mayor Wu, I won't tell you those false words. I'm in business and it's impossible for me to invest a large amount of money before I see profits. Listening to Mr. Hong's words, he seemed to be a very down-to-earth person. Mayor Wu nodded and told him to continue. Mr. Hong said straight to the point, I only have 3 requests. Mayor Wu listened silently and hesitated a little. Mr. Hong's 3 requirements. The first one is reasonable. He will contract the farmland for 20 years and use it for free for the first 2 years. Those are nearby forest lands, and the contracting price is not high. The key is that few people will come here to contract. The second one is a bit excessive. Although the employees of the farm are all from Suntown, their wages are in arrears for half a year at first, and will be repaid in one go after half a year. It is said that after the Chinese New Year, Mr. Hong's restaurant needs to make a large purchase and its liquidity is tight. That's fine, but the third item made Mayor Wu wary. Mr. Hong hopes that the town government will come forward to use the breeding farm to obtain bank loans and use the loan to build the breeding farm. Granting land, taking out a loan, then using the loan to operate, and finally repaying the loan are actually relatively common business practices. Borrowing a chicken to lay eggs does not necessarily mean that Mr. Hong is a liar. Some bosses made a fortune from nothing just like this, while some bosses completely collapsed because one of their links was broken. Since the county had encountered several such scams, Lao Wu could not help but be more cautious. Mr. Hong, we must first be villains before being gentlemen. Your request is not impossible. But I also have a condition. You must mortgage your restaurant to our family. Otherwise, if you run away in the end, where will Suntown come from? Return the money to the bank, Mayor Wu said with a smile. Unexpectedly, Mr. Hong didn't object at all, and nodded directly and said, that's right. Today we can go to the county notary office to get the mortgage notarization. Mayor Wu, you are actually too worried. My family has a big business and a large turnover. After the Chinese New Year, my restaurant business is booming and I have to spend a lot of money to purchase goods. After half a year, I have liquidity and everything is fine. Seeing that Mr. Hong agreed so simply, Mayor Wu finally felt relieved. Mayor Wu, how about we sign the contract today and then do the mortgage notarization together, Mr. Hong asked tentatively. Old Wu was about to nod, but when he thought about it, such a big matter should not be decided so hastily. So he laughed and said, Mr. Hong, let's go to the county guest house to stay for 2 days. We will hold a small meeting in the town and prepare some preliminary work. After 3 days, we will sign the contract. What do you think? Mr. Hong sighed a little disappointedly, hey, just do whatever your leader says. But Mayor Wu, please hurry up. I have too many things at the restaurant and I really can't spare any time. Don't worry, don't worry. After seeing Mr. Hong off, Mayor Wu took his office phone and called the cotters in the town one by one, and called them all to a meeting to discuss the farm. Based on the size of Suntown, it should have been downgraded to a village long ago, but it has been delayed. The so-called cotters of the town are just 2 or 3 big cats and kittens. It's quite funny to talk about it. For example, the second uncle is the head of the town's armed forces department, the third aunt is the office director and almost an organization committee member. Even Su Ming's mother is involved. The title of a women's committee member was given. Su Ming said hello to his mother, and then he and Su Meng followed the path the wild boar escaped into the mountain yesterday. This path was actually a small mountain stream that had dried up in winter. We walked along the riverbed full of pebbles. It looked like there was no way out within 4 or 5 miles. Hai Dongqing hovered in the sky for a while, indicating that the wild boar was still far away. The mountains around Bamboo Town are not the mountains behind the zoo. They are real mountains. Many of them are surrounded by cliffs, or cliffs more than 10 meters high, or steep slopes with a slope of 60 or 70 degrees, making it impossible for people to climb up. Su Ming possessed Hai Dongqing's spirit, flew into the air and observed for a while, and finally chose a relatively easy route. The so-called relatively easy walk only means that people can barely pass it. Fortunately, I have Hai Dongqing and the ability to possess souls, otherwise I don't know how long the detour would have been. Even though I had observed the environment in advance, I had to go through thorns and cross mountains and rivers along the way. It was almost dark before I approached the place where the wild boar finally settled. Su Ming didn't expect the road to be so difficult. He wiped his sweat and thought that his mother would be worried to death now, and she probably wouldn't be able to go back until tomorrow morning. "Slow down, stop here," Su Ming gestured, signaling Su Meng not to go forward. The two found a place to hide downwind. Su Meng was agile and climbed up a tree like a monkey. Su Ming slapped his forehead helplessly and whispered, "Brother, get me up first." Su Meng grinned and then climbed down again. Su Ming was like a koala, lying on his back and carrying Su Ming to a tree a few meters above the ground. From the view of the Saker falcon, it can be clearly seen that there is a large mud pit covered with dead leaves about 100 meters ahead, and there is sewage under the dead leaves. The big wild boars seen yesterday were swimming around in the mud pit, looking so happy, and there was no pain of losing their children at all. In the woods next to them, 7 or 8 small wild boars were humming and digging the soil on the ground with their mouths, probably looking for something to eat. The second brother, the biggest one, leaned against a tree that 2 people could hug together. He was like having an epileptic seizure, humming and rubbing his back against the old tree, rubbing off a large piece of bark. Not far away, there was a pile of pig manure that was almost 1 meter high. I don't understand why they piled the manure so high. Is it to prove that they have a talent for construction? It's really not easy to attack a large group of wild boars gathered together, but Su Ming came this time with sufficient preparation and had planned the attack plan long ago. He took out a small whistle-like thing from his arms, which was used by old hunters when hunting wild boars. He put it in his mouth and blew it hard. Yee, yee yee. The whistle made a very strange sound, like the cry of a female wild boar in heat. After hearing the sound of the female wild boar calling, the wild boars over there really stopped their animals, their little ears trembled, and they raised their heads and looked over here strangely. The wild boars were probably a little confused because they heard the calls of the sows but didn't smell their scent. However, this is not a problem. If you look over, you will know that for male wild boars, eating is the first priority and mating is the second. As long as there is food and work in life, the pig's life is happy and this life is not lived in vain. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 234. Several male wild boars heard the whistle and were about to take action, but the second brother stopped them first. It climbed up from under the tree, staggered to stop the other wild boars, lowered its head, and roared at them in a threatening manner. Like most social animals, the wild boar group also has a strict hierarchy. As the pig king, the second brother always eats the delicious food first, plays with the fun things first, and gets the pretty girls first. He is used to being domineering. After being roared by the second brother, the other male wild boars hummed indignantly, swung their tails, and turned around to find something to eat. Only one guy, about 400 pounds, not much smaller than the second brother, confronted the second brother for a while, but when the second brother showed his fangs, this guy was scared and turned around and walked away. Su Ming guessed that this would be the result. The biggest gain from working in the zoo is that he learned about the living habits of many animals. He has the help of mental power and understands the living habits of animals, which is very important. His plan is to attract the second brother first, and then use mental power to cooperate with Su Ming to deal with the second brother as soon as possible. The second brother, who weighs 600 or 700 pounds, is like a small mountain. He is the most difficult one in the pig group. One-on-one, Su Meng may not be his opponent, but with the help of mental power, it should be no problem. As long as the second brother is dealt with, the remaining few will be a piece of cake. Soon, the second brother shook his big belly and left the pig group, and walked towards this side. Get ready, Su Ming winked at Su Meng. Su Meng suffered last night because the second brother took advantage of inertia. Today, we will also use the same method to treat him. Let Su Meng jump down from the tree and fall vertically to hit the second brother dizzy first. Since wild boars have poor eyesight but a keen sense of smell, Su Ming borrowed the method of tigers hunting wild boars and hid in the downwind. The second brother approached with a shaky step, full of expectations for a big fight, and was completely unaware of the danger. Just as he was about to get close, the second brother suddenly stopped. He tilted his head and looked to the left and back, humming a few times. What's going on? Su Ming was stunned and subconsciously looked in that direction. There was not a single hair. In the broad-leaved forest, there were only dead leaves, a few trees, and a few large and small stones on the ground. But in the eyes of the second brother, it was not like that. It was obviously attracted by the thing on the left, and it didn't even care about the pretty girl. It turned around and trotted to the left without hesitation. It must have found something delicious, right? Su Ming thought. For animals, eating and mating, eating is the first priority, and so are people. They only think about that when they are full. Except for perverts, no one will masturbate when they are hungry / what the hell, Su Ming won't do it anyway. Wild boars have a very good sense of smell. They can smell things buried 1 or 2 meters underground. They probably smelled something delicious. The second brother walked a short distance and stopped under a tree. He lowered his head and used his long mouth to dig around under the tree. Soon, the thick fallen leaves around were pushed open, and a big hole big enough for him to bury his head appeared on the ground. Su Ming was also curious. He didn't know what kind of food the wild boar had found. He couldn't see clearly from the tree, so he let the saker falcon fall down and stop on the top of the old poplar tree that the wild boar had dug. He attached his soul to the saker falcon and looked down with his head down. Looking vertically down, he saw that the wild boar had pushed open a large piece of dead leaves. Under the tree, there was a Ganoderma lucidum. The Ganoderma lucidum was not big, just a little bigger than the palm of an adult man. It was light purple and a little white. Su Ming didn't know much about plants, and he didn't know what the quality of this Ganoderma lucidum was and how much it was worth. Generally, Lingzi is a treasure in legends, but most of them are hyped up. Depending on the appearance, variety, and year, the value varies greatly. The expensive ones are of course extremely expensive, while the cheap ones can be bought for dozens or hundreds of yuan. They are not rare treasures. The second brother was obviously attracted by this Lingzi. His 2 little ears fluttered back and forth excitedly, and he nodded with a pouty pig mouth. Gurgle gurgle gurgle, after a few bites, the Lingzi was gnawed clean. Such a small Lingzi may not be enough to feed a dog, let alone the size of the second brother. It was obviously unwilling to give up. After eating the top, it wanted to eat the bottom. Eat the bottom means that the second brother began to dig the ground with his mouth and teeth, trying to throw out all the roots of the Lingzi. Grunting, grunting, just after digging twice, the second brother suddenly whooshed and stepped back a few steps, his 2 small black eyes staring at the ground vigilantly. Su Ming was stunned. What good stuff did he find? There was a fist-sized hole at the root of the Ganoderma lucidum. Looking from above, the hole seemed very deep and dark, and there was nothing inside. When the saker falcon saw the hole, it couldn't help but flap its wings and fly away. Su Ming quickly asked it to wait a moment, so as not to scare away the second brother. The second brother stared at the hole for a while, and suddenly put his long pointed beak into the hole, and then made a wheezing sound, as if blowing air into the hole. Su Ming almost laughed at the look on his face. What was he doing? Blowing up a big balloon? After blowing a few times, the second brother pulled out his nose again, took 2 steps back, and still stared at the hole closely. Just look at the hole, a triangular head slowly emerges, followed by a gray-brown neck. At first glance, it looks like a dead leaf. If it weren't for the good eyesight of the Saker falcon, Su-Ming might not be able to see it clearly. It turned out to be a 5-step snake. Su-Ming suddenly realized that it was no wonder that the second senior brother blew air. This 5-step snake was probably hibernating. The second senior brother blew warm air into the cave just to wake it up and lure it out to eat. Just now, the Saker falcon suddenly flapped its wings and wanted to fly because it found the snake cave. Just from the head, this 5-step snake is not small, and it is unknown whether the second senior brother is its opponent. Encountering such an interesting thing, Su-Ming was not in a hurry to deal with the second senior brother. He squatted on the tree and watched the battle with great interest. After the 5-step snake showed its head, it probably didn't know what happened. It hissed and spit a few times, as if testing the surrounding environment. The second brother rushed over with an agility that was totally inconsistent with its size. His fangs hooked the 5-step snake's neck and he shook his head vigorously. Like a naughty child pulling a roll of wool, the whole body of the 5-step snake was dragged out of the cave by the second brother. It was at least 1.5 meters long. The 5-step snake was not easy to mess with. It opened its mouth and bit the second brother's nose. If it bit the second brother, even the eldest brother would die. The second brother shook his head, and the 5-step snake was thrown out before it could bite it, and fell into the dry grass. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 235. After being thrown away, the first reaction of the 5-step snake was not to escape, but to coil its whole body together, raise its triangular tongue, extend its flame-like tongue, and hiss at the second brother in protest. The second brother stood 1 meter away, not in a hurry to attack, staring at the 5-step snake with his small eyes, making a wow-wow call, like a martial arts master, stepping on 4 short legs, and circling around the 5-step snake slowly. Su-Ming was afraid that it would attract other wild boars. Fortunately, there was no movement in the distance. It was probably because of the downwind that the wild boars over there did not smell the scent of the 5-step snake. The second brother turned around, and the 5-step snake's head also turned, staring at the second brother's every move. Seeing this scene, Su-Ming immediately felt that the second brother was definitely smarter than he thought. On the contrary, this 5-step snake was stupid. If you follow it, you will get dizzy sooner or later. Sure enough, after turning 2 circles, the 5-step snake finally couldn't help it and took the lead in launching an attack. With a whoosh, its body suddenly shot up, its mouth grew nearly 180 degrees, and its 2 fangs protruded outside, like a sharp blade, and stabbed at the crotch of the second brother. What a trick to bite the eggs! The second brother's skin was all hard, rough and thick, and even if the 5-step snake bit him, it might not be able to bite through. But the 2 big eggs hanging down from his crotch were his weaknesses, big and soft, and he would die if bitten. Although this move looks indecent, it is the most common way for venomous snakes to deal with wild boars. The reaction of the second brother was not like that of a stupid pig at all. Even if the monkey brother was here, he would not do better than him. He kicked his hind legs hard and made a nearly handstand to avoid the 5-step snake. The 5-step snake flew close to its big testicles, but unfortunately its body was too long. After its head went through the crotch, the back half of its body had not come over yet, and the second brother's hind legs had already fallen down, stepping on its tail. The 5-step snake felt pain and turned around to bite, but unexpectedly, the second brother was faster, and his other hind leg stepped firmly on the 5-step snake's 7 inches, then turned his head and opened his mouth, biting the 5-step snake's head. Without waiting for the 5-step snake to fight back, the second brother raised his neck and put the 5-step snake, including its head and a small part of its body, into his mouth, chewing it with a gurgling sound, eating it with relish. In less than 2 minutes, the more than 1 meter long 5-step snake was sucked into the mouth of the second brother like eating noodles, and then chewed it into pieces and swallowed it into his stomach. Even a domestic pig can easily bite a red brick with its teeth and swallow it. Su Ming did this when he was a child, hitting a pig with a brick, and the pig actually chewed the brick and ate it. Now it seems that the second brother is even more fierce, and being bitten by it is definitely not a joke. Is it okay? Su Ming asked Su Meng. Su Meng nodded vigorously. Su Ming blew the whistle again. After being full and warm, he wants to do that. The second brother finished eating the snake and was exhausted. When he heard the sow scream again, he immediately got excited and ran to the tree where Su Meng was, but there was no trace of the sow. Just as he was wondering, his mind suddenly buzzed. Su Ming had already launched an attack with his mental power on the tree, and he poured out his mental power without reservation, hitting the wild boar like a cannonball. Then he drank a big mouthful of honey. Next time, let the bees brew some Orleans barbecue flavor. Su Ming smacked his lips, thinking that it was too monotonous to always drink the same flavor of honey. The Orleans barbecue flavor was not good, so adding some juice in the future would be fine. In a flash, when the wild boar was in a daze, Su Meng shouted and fell from the sky. His posture was very similar to that of a policeman in an old game Street Fighter. He jumped up, closed his legs, and stepped on his opponent's head with his foot. Su Meng was a big man weighing nearly 200 pounds. With the added gravity of free fall, the second brother also tasted the taste of acceleration today. He fell headfirst and was stepped into the ground. "Come on, end the battle as soon as possible," Su Ming shouted from the tree. The noise here was too loud. Even if it was a group of pig teammates, they would have heard the sound and rushed to help. Sure enough, the wild boars in the distance were startled and began to move towards the side. "Help harass them," Su Ming quickly asked the Saker falcon to take off. Wild boars are irritable and are most easily provoked. The Saker falcon flew over and pecked each wild boar's head fiercely, and then flew flexibly in the air not high from the ground. Although he did not suffer any fatal injuries, he immediately aroused the anger of the wild boars. These pig teammates immediately forgot their mission to rescue the boss and ran around in the forest, chasing the Saker falcon. "I have teammates like gods, and you have teammates like pigs." "Wow, haha," Su Ming was almost laughing to death. When these wild boars are smart, they are smarter than monkeys, and when they are stupid, they are simply hilarious. Under the tree, the second brother was hit by Su Meng's foot hammer and was knocked dizzy. Just as he shook his head and tried to stand up, Su Ming sent another mental force. He was confused and felt that there was a person riding on his back. "Wild boar rider, come on," Su Ming shouted on the tree. Su Meng rode on the back of the second brother, just like the wild boar rider of the barbarian tribe in Heroes of Might and Magic. However, the wild boar under his crotch was not obedient. It carried him and tried its best to hit the tree, not hesitating to hurt both sides. "Hee," Su Meng roared, raised his fist as big as a sand bowl, and punched the wild boar's back and head. At the same time, Su Ming also sent out mental power from time to time to interfere with the wild boar's forward route. The second brother completely became a headless fly, running around in the forest. He clearly wanted to hit the tree with his back to hurt Su Meng, but every time he didn't know why, he hit the tree with his head. No matter how thick the wild boar's skin is, it can't stand such violent collisions again and again. After a few times, it was a little scared and didn't dare to hit the tree hard. It hummed in the woods in a daze. There were waves of severe pain on his back. Su Meng's fists were balled. If it weren't for the thick skin of the wild boar, a tiger would probably have been beaten to death by him. Now, Su Ming saw that the wild boar's will was weakened, and his mental power immediately surged, trying to control it. The so-called control is actually normal communication, and both sides can coexist peacefully. Animals don't have so many ghosts. As long as they can communicate normally, they will be obedient with a little trickery, so that they will not harm crops in the future. Before, the wild boar was completely unreasonable and unwilling to communicate. This was not the first time Su Ming encountered such a situation. The alligator gar was like this. At the beginning, it was more arrogant than the wild boar. After being caught, it tried to counterattack. For this, Su Ming said one sentence, "Beat it and then talk." After the mental power surged, he immediately got in touch with the wild boar. Unexpectedly, this second brother was actually a man of integrity. After being beaten like this, he still ignored Su Ming. After noticing that Su Ming was on the tree, the second brother turned his head and actually hit the tree fiercely. The tree was not thick. After being hit by the second brother, the trunk shook violently, and Su Ming almost fell down. Oh! Thick skin and thick flesh are not afraid of beating? Second brother, you forced me to do this. Su Ming opened the small bag he carried with him. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 236. Su Ming's small bag contained many red, pointed plants. All the farmers in Suntown were afraid of wild boars, except for one family. Because his family grew peppers. Once, wild boars came down the mountain to destroy crops. Some of them were so ignorant that they rushed into his pepper field and ate it fiercely. Then, nothing happened. The wild boars ate a few bites of the peppers and went home crying. Su Ming was a person who liked spicy food. He was poor when he went to school and couldn't afford to eat in the cafeteria. He often ate with dried peppers. Su Ming gave his soul-attaching ability to his second senior brother. The second senior brother glared at Su Ming fiercely at first, and then saw Su Ming take out the red peppers and stuff them into his mouth. In this cold weather, raw dried chili peppers are so delicious. Su Ming chewed a handful of dried chili peppers like he was eating snacks, and waved to Su Ming, "Do you want to eat it? It's delicious." He even prepared a tube of spicy strips, and if the chili peppers didn't work, he would use spicy strips. But it seems that spicy strips are useless. Su Ming just took a bite, and the second brother below suddenly stood still as if he was hit by a spell. The next second, the second brother let out a pig-killing howl, and ran towards the pool not far away with Su Ming on his back, diving into the pool and drinking water in big gulps. The spicy feeling came from Su Ming's mouth, not the second brother himself, so it was useless no matter how much water he drank. The only effect was to make Su Ming feel like he was drinking water. Su Ming was a little thirsty after eating so many peppers, but after drinking water, he felt refreshed all over. He grabbed more peppers and put them into his mouth. While eating, he muttered something vaguely, saying that it would be nice to have a little wine. Hoo, the second brother drank a bellyful of water, but the spicy taste in his mouth became stronger and stronger. Until finally, he couldn't drink any more water and climbed up the shore with difficulty. Tears, big drops of them slid down from the corners of the second brother's eyes. "Is it spicy?" Su Ming asked. The second brother nodded vigorously, panting with his mouth open. "Can we talk?" Su Ming asked again. The second brother nodded vigorously again. After the second brother became honest, the other wild boar surrendered without much effort. Only the guy who was about 400 kilograms and only slightly smaller than the second brother, probably the second leader of the pig group, was still a little unconvinced and wanted to compete with Su Ming. Facts have proved that the number 2 leader is not as powerful as the number 1 leader. Su Ming only ate a few peppers, and the second pig was completely convinced. "You too, there are so many delicious things in the mountains," such as Ganoderma lucidum, mountain spring water, Artemisia silengensis, hemp seeds, and poisonous snakes. They are inexhaustible and inexhaustible. Why do you have to harm people's crops? After the beating, it was ideological education, both hard and soft. It's like educating a child. If you really make a mistake, you should be punished. After the punishment, you should also talk about the reason. Su Ming rode on the back of the second brother and talked to a group of wild boars of all sizes. The Saker falcon landed on the head of the second pig like a big crow, demonstrating what it means to be a crow landing on the back of a pig. The wild boars panted heavily. Although they were honest and didn't attack again, it seemed that they didn't realize their mistakes. That's right. In your eyes, crops are also plants and your food. However, stealing crops is risking your life. Is it necessary? At first, Su Ming thought that there was no food in the mountains, so these guys came out. But now it seems that there is a lot of food and drink in the mountains. I have only been here for a while, and I saw the second senior brother eating a big snake and a Ganoderma lucidum. Other wild boars have also found a lot of food and drink. In this case, why do they still risk going out of the mountains? Animal instinct will stay away from humans, unless... Huff, huff. The second senior brother pouted at the distance. Huh? You don't live here? Su Ming asked. The second pig walked out of the team, shyly raised his hind legs and exposed his crotch. Are you bored? I ask you serious questions, and you show me your balls. What's this? Su Ming felt puzzled. Could it be that the second pig wanted to use its beauty to seduce him? But at a glance, there was only one testicle left between the legs of Pig Lao Er, hanging there alone. The other one was bitten off by something. Oh my God, how painful it must be. Su Ming and Su Mang, two male animals, subconsciously clamped their legs together, but they couldn't help but feel a chill between their legs. Don't talk nonsense in the future. I just talked about giving birth that day, and I experienced it myself. I was still thinking about how many units the feeling of a broken testicle was. Well, today I met someone with a broken testicle. Second senior brother was on the side, using simple thinking to roughly tell Su Ming the situation. Su Ming got goosebumps when he heard it, because it was too tragic. It was so tragic that people couldn't help but want to laugh wildly, but they were embarrassed to laugh. Because Pig Lao Er's testicle was not bitten off by someone else, but by second senior brother. One day, Zhu Lao Er was bitten by a poisonous snake at that position. In order to save his companion, the second brother decisively bit off the poisonous snake's crotch and bit off the poisoned testicles of Zhu Lao Er. Okay, stop here, don't talk about this issue anymore. If he continued, Su Ming was afraid that he would have nightmares in the future. In general, the situation is like this. The habitat where the wild boars originally lived was a very good place. There were many delicious foods and drinks, such as Lingzi Mountain Spring, but it was occupied by a group of poisonous snakes. Although wild boars are the natural enemies of poisonous snakes, if there are too many poisonous snakes, the wild boars can do nothing but flee in panic. This group of wild boars are temporarily homeless, so they run around everywhere, going wherever they go, and breaking into human territory. Should I help you or not? You know, I don't like wild boars, Su Ming thought while stroking his chin. When Su Ming left Sun Town, it was probably less than 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He told his mother that he was going out to play. Who knew that he would not come back until 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening? You say this child, he has grown up so big but still makes people worry. Where can he go if the car is not driven away? Sue's mother was really a little anxious. The area around the mountain village is not as safe as the city, especially at night. Not to mention the threats of various wild beasts. Even if he gets lost, he will be in big trouble. Mayor Wu was also at home, and advised, "Hey, young man, it's not a big deal to go into the mountains. Su Ming went into the mountains, and there was no signal on his mobile phone, so he stayed at home. Mother Su nodded, flipped through her mobile phone, and saw Director Song's number. Su Ming came back a few days ago and talked a lot about Director Song. Mother Su knew that her son had a good relationship with this leader, so she couldn't help but call Director Song. She was afraid of leaving a bad impression on the leader, so she didn't say directly that Su Ming was missing, but asked very tactfully whether the zoo had assigned Su Ming any task, such as going into the mountains. When Director Song heard it, he guessed it all, and said with a smile, "Is this kid missing again?" "Oh, yes, he went into the mountains and couldn't find him." After hearing what Director Song said, Mother Su didn't hide it. But she was still stunned for a moment. Why did she say again? "Hey, don't worry. This kid Su Ming is not the first time. He often disappears in my place. Don't worry. As far as I know, there is nothing he can't handle in the wild. Maybe he can bring some surprises when he comes back," Director Song said on the other end of the phone. "What surprise?" "Being safe and sound is the biggest surprise." After a few pleasantries, Sue's mother felt relieved and hung up the phone. Mayor Wu advised her aunt, "Don't be too anxious. Wait a minute. If she doesn't come back at night, I will ask someone to go into the mountains to look for her tomorrow morning." Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 237. Su Ming and Su Mang, each riding a large wild boar, followed by a dozen smaller ones, headed into the mountains in a mighty manner. When people are the protagonists, they are just dragon knights and phoenixes. In fact, Su Ming was better off. He originally wanted to be a knight of the mythical beast, but it turned out that the grass mud horse was too timid to ride, so he had to be a wild boar knight. A large group of wild boars and 2 people marched into the mountains, wading through mountains and rivers until midnight, and finally arrived at the place where the wild boars used to live. The wild boars stopped dozens of meters away, gathered together, and looked ahead warily. Su Ming's spiritual power surged out and poured into the dense forest ahead, but he was shocked. With Su Ming's current level of mental strength, even if he saw tigers, lions, or even animals such as elephants and whales, he would not be surprised. But what he found at the wild boar house still made him take a breath. The so-called wild boar home, where the wild boars used to live, is actually a forest dominated by wetlands. It was too dark to see the specific situation clearly. But under the shroud of mental power, it can be clearly discovered that there are a large number of long-shaped creatures in this small area. Obviously, it's a snake. There are all kinds of snakes, big and small, probably thousands at least. Second brother, they didn't lie, it was indeed snakes that took over their home. What really surprised Su Ming was not the number of snakes, but that so many snakes were actually swimming. The forest is simply a snake garden, with snakes hanging everywhere on the treetops and branches, and the wetland in the middle is full of snakes swimming in the water and plants. You know, this is winter, the season for snakes to hibernate. If occasionally 1 or 2 snakes are extremely hungry, or for some special reason, they break out of hibernation and come out to find something to eat, that would be okay, but thousands of snakes, at the same time, it violates the laws of nature. Instead of hibernating in this winter, they gather together. That is so abnormal. Moreover, many snakes have the habit of devouring their own kind, especially in winter when food is insufficient. Not to mention their own eggs, they will eat their own eggs without hesitation. But the thousands of snakes in the wild boar house in front of us can live in peace. What is the force that makes these snakes give up hibernation and gather together without disturbing each other? Beside the wetland, there was an area of tens of square meters, but it seemed a bit empty, with only one snake. A 5 to 6 meter long reticulated python. The reticulated python, also known as the Rex python, is the longest python in the world. There are 2 biggest among pythons. The green anaconda is the largest python, and the reticulated python is the longest. The average adult reticulated python is 8 or 9 meters long, and the longest one is said to be more than 12 meters long. The body is long but not heavy. What does this mean? It shows that the reticulated python has a good figure and is slim. 100 meters away, the reticulated python looks slender and long, with graceful curves. But don't be deceived by its appearance. Thin people have strength. Although the reticulated python is slender, its winding power is amazing, and it is not weaker than the huge green anaconda. This 5 to 6 meter long reticulated python is obviously not yet an adult and is just a juvenile python. Of course, this behemoth, even in its juvenile stage, can cause fatal damage to ordinary wild boars. This reticulated python, if not the opponent of the second senior brother, is probably at least a tie with the second brother pig. Seeing this reticulated python, Su Ming was even more confused. This kind of python, which is actually relatively docile, has long been on the verge of extinction, and has never appeared in the Kinling Mountains. Why does it appear here now? Su Ming had to be cautious when he saw so many snakes gathering together, including a reticulated python. It was too dark. Even with the help of spiritual power, it was extremely dangerous to enter the wild boar house. There were too many highly venomous snakes here. If one was bitten accidentally, it would be doomed. Hai Dongqing stood on the treetop, a little ready to move. Although there are many venomous snakes, for them that can fly, they are not a problem at all. They are just a moving feast. If you give it enough time, such as a month, maybe it can take care of all the snakes by itself. Except, of course, for the reticulated python. Let's wait until daybreak. After Su Ming finished speaking, he touched his pants pocket. There is a packet of realgar powder in his pocket. There are many snakes in the mountains. People in Suntown usually bring a small packet of realgar powder with them before going into the mountains. They can be used to get rid of snakes in case they spend the night in the mountains. Su Ming had also developed this habit since he was a child. Just a little bit of realgar powder was obviously of no use in dealing with thousands of snakes. Damn it, you always know this, buy a ton of realgar powder and come in. Time passed quickly, and the sky gradually became brighter. The first ray of sunshine in the morning fell into the woods, but the surroundings were quiet, not even a bird chirped. So many snakes gathered together that all the surrounding birds were eaten up. After dawn, Su Ming discovered a new situation. The wild boar's house is indeed a good place. The surrounding woods are lush with vegetation. The old trees are covered with all kinds of fungi. Wild mushrooms are everywhere, and there are even large tracts of Ganoderma lucidum. Ganoderma lucidum may not be very valuable. Su Ming didn't do much research on the quality of Ganoderma lucidum, so he just took a look. His eyes were attracted to the center of the wetland. The wetland was full of water plants, so it didn't freeze in the winter. In the middle of the wetland, there was a piece of land about 20 to 30 square meters that emerged from the water, like a small island in the water. The wetland and the surrounding forests were full of snakes, but there was not a single snake in the area in the middle of the wetland. Not only were there no snakes, there were no water plants, but there was a kind of fungus that looked like mushrooms. It looked like a mushroom, but it wasn't a mushroom. First of all, it was much smaller than a mushroom, and the small umbrella on top was half an oval, not an oblate one. The surface was light yellow, uneven, and covered with mesh wrinkles, like a small football-like honeycomb. Could it be a morel? Su Ming's mind flashed. Su Ming didn't know the specific value of Ganoderma lucidum, but he knew a thing or two about morels. This rare fungus is as famous as the black truffle, which is known as the diamond fungus. If the black truffle is the king of fungi, then the morel is the queen of fungi. It is not only delicious, but also tastes like fresh meat. It is a plant and has high nutritional value. It has the effects of nourishing the kidney, strengthening yang, nourishing the brain, and refreshing. In terms of price, the international market price of wild morels is as high as 3,000 to 4,000 euros per kilogram. Even if it is artificially cultivated, it costs 1,000 to 2,000 yuan. It can be said that the economic value is extremely high. Wild morels are relatively rare, and most of them grow in high-altitude areas. It is basically impossible to appear in mountains like Sunzan with an altitude of less than 1,000 meters. So the appearance of this large area of morels in front of Suming was very surprising. Could it be that these snakes, including the large reticulated python, were attracted by this area of morels and wanted to compete for these morels? Suming guessed secretly. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 238. It is said that animals like snakes have a kind of spirituality and will instinctively guard the natural treasures of the world. For example, there are often animals protecting around 1,000-year-old ginseng or top-grade Ganoderma lucidum. In fact, to put it bluntly, animals find valuable plants, but they are not yet fully mature, so they run over to occupy a territory and wait for them to mature and eat them. Among the large area of wild morels in front of me, there are obviously a few large ones. If it is not unexpected, it must be these delicious and nutritious morels that attract all the nearby snakes. Hee, are these snakes all yang wei, so they want to eat morels to strengthen their yang? Suming guessed maliciously. You know, morels, like black truffles, have the greatest nutritional value, which is to strengthen yang and nourish the kidneys. Napoleon was amazingly strong in this aspect. Not only did he conquer countless enemies on the battlefield, but he also conquered countless noble ladies in bed. However, it is said that Napoleon was not very good when he was young, and his ability was at best medium. He had a general under him who was very powerful and had more than a dozen children. Napoleon learned that the reason why the general was so vigorous was because he ate several black truffle stewed chickens every day, so he also learned this method and ate a lot of black truffles. Sure enough, his ability increased and he gave birth to a son that year. Regardless of whether this legend is true or not, the effect of black truffles on male sexual function is well known. At an auction one year, Dr. He from Macau once bought a black truffle king for nearly 3 million yuan to celebrate his 86th birthday. Dr. He has seen countless women in his life, married 3 wives, and has many children and grandchildren. He still bought the black truffle king when he was over 80 years old. You can see the mystery. The effect of morels in this regard is not inferior to that of black truffles. Not only the snake was tempted, but even Suming couldn't help salivating when he saw these morels. It's not that he wants to replenish his kidneys at a young age, but he thought of the large open space behind the zoo. He had been thinking about planting something in the back mountain of the zoo to make use of the vacant land and generate some economic benefits. But planting ordinary plants is too cost-effective. It takes a lot of effort to make hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year, which is not very meaningful. But if you plant morels, it will be different. In the past, I thought that morels could only survive in plateau areas, but now it has been proved that morels can also grow well in the mountains and forests below 1,000 meters above sea level around Suntown, so it should be okay to transplant them to the back mountain of the zoo. In the domestic market, even artificial morels can be sold for 400 or 500 yuan per catty. If it is in the international market, the price is even higher. The environment in the back mountain is definitely much better than that under artificial conditions, almost in a semi-wild state. Moreover, the growth of any plant cannot be separated from water, which is one of the most important elements for plant growth. Now the lake water soaked by Tai Sui is more than enough for fish farming and building a winery in the future. It is definitely not enough to irrigate the entire mountain forest, but if it is just a small piece of morel, it is not a big problem. If you can cultivate more than 10 acres of top-quality morel, it is not laborious, but it is a considerable income. Even if the output is less, it is great to eat it yourself, regardless of the economic value. No matter how much money you have, it is not as important as your health. Thinking of this, Su Ming wondered how to get that piece of morel among thousands of snakes. Or use the method of controlling bees to control some snakes first and let them fight among themselves. Or let the wild boars line up in a charge formation and rush directly to disperse these snakes. Su Ming touched his chin and thought of several ways. He was weighing which method was better. Su Ming was not the only one who was eyeing morels. As the saying goes, the quick mouth eats a piece of meat, and the slow mouth doesn't get it. He was thinking about strategies and tactics here, but someone couldn't wait. The 5 or 6 meter long Tyrannosaurus python slowly swam into the wetland, twisting its body flexibly in the water plants and swimming towards the morel group in the center of the wetland. As a giant among a group of snakes, its movement immediately alarmed other snakes. Several Chifeng elephants and red-spotted elephants that blocked the Tyrannosaurus python's route saw the Tyrannosaurus python swimming towards them and immediately fled in all directions. Most pythons, including Tyrannosaurus pythons, are immune to many snake venoms and are not afraid of those venomous snakes, so the Tyrannosaurus python completely ignores those little guys that are less than a few tenths of its size. Su Ming's eyes lit up. To capture a thief, you must first capture the king. Since other snakes are afraid of this Tyrannosaurus python, can't I just control the Tyrannosaurus python directly? What is this called, holding the emperor hostage to command the princes? He, big brother, how about I take you back with me after I dig up the morels? You can stay in my back mountain and help me guard the morels. Su Ming grinned and was about to release his mental power. Unexpectedly, the situation suddenly changed. After the Tyrannosaurus entered the wetland, it was like entering an empty space at first. Wherever it passed, all kinds of small snakes around fled, but as it kept approaching the group of morels in the middle of the wetland, the small snakes stopped fleeing. Not only did they not flee, but some fierce ones, such as the red-banded snake, took the initiative to attack the Tyrannosaurus. A red-banded snake and a black-banded snake swooped up and opened their mouths to bite the Tyrannosaurus fiercely. The Tyrannosaurus was covered in scales and armor, and the scales on its body were hard and thick. Even a pistol might not pose any threat to it at a long distance, let alone two small snakes. The attacks of the red-banded snake and the black-banded snake did not cause any damage to the Tyrannosaurus at all, and did not even bite through its scales. The Tyrannosaurus was attacked, and it twisted its body casually, and threw the less than 1 meter long red-banded snake directly away. Then it opened its big mouth and bit the black-banded snake into its mouth, swallowing it directly without chewing. The black-banded snake and the red-banded snake paid the price of their lives, but they could not stop the Tyrannosaurus from moving forward, and only brought it a little insignificant trouble. Two small snakes are not enough to stop the Tyrannosaurus, but what if there are more? As the Tyrannosaurus python continued to move towards the morels in the center of the wetland, not only did the snakes in the front stop running and attack the Tyrannosaurus python, but even a large number of snakes entrenched nearby also left their small territory and swam towards the Tyrannosaurus python from all directions. After discovering that the Tyrannosaurus python wanted to swallow the morels alone, the thousands of small snakes scattered around actually shared a common hatred of the enemy, and in less than half a minute, they all rushed into the wetland and surrounded the Tyrannosaurus python in 3 layers inside and outside. Seeing this scene, Su Ming suddenly realized that so many snakes gathered together to maintain a delicate balance just for that large piece of morels, and the Tyrannosaurus python relied on its size and strength to want to swallow it all alone, but ended up angering everyone. Huh? So, they will fight to the death without me even having to do anything. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 239. As the saying goes, a master can be defeated by a random punch. The Tyrannosaurus rex is very fierce. In a one-on-one fight, The snakes present, even the most poisonous ones, could not pose a substantial threat to it. They were just delivering food to its door. But there were too many snakes. There were at least 2,000 or 3,000 poisonous snakes of various kinds gathered around the Tyrannosaurus rex. The small ones were 40 to 50 centimeters long, and the big ones were 1 or 2 meters long. They either raised their tongues high in the water, spitting out their snake nature as if threatening the Tyrannosaurus rex, or lurked in the water, ready to attack at any time. However, these snakes were not stupid. They just surrounded the Tyrannosaurus rex and did not attack immediately. Perhaps they also knew that in this situation, whoever attacked first would die first. The instinct of living things to survive allowed them to clearly judge the strength of the enemy. And the Tyrannosaurus rex was even more not stupid. Animals may not have high intelligence, but they all have sharp intuition and are quite accurate in judging the situation. Especially animals as large as the Tyrannosaurus rex would not easily put themselves in danger. After seeing thousands of snakes surrounding it, the Tyrannosaurus rex wisely stopped moving forward and coiled up in the wetland. It was not in a hurry to swim forward again, and Triangle Eyes observed coldly. "Hey, the way the big snake coiled up looks like a pile of super large feces." No, I'm thinking nonsense again." Su Ming patted his face, pulled his mind back from the messy thoughts, and concentrated on watching the Tyrannosaurus rex's movements. This guy coiled up like feces. Triangle Eyes stared at the surroundings for a while, turned his head to the direction he came from, and actually showed signs of retreating, as if giving up. "That won't work. If you retreat, will I have to deal with these poisonous snakes alone? It's too dangerous. As the saying goes, the emperor is not anxious, but the eunuch is anxious." The Tyrannosaurus rex was ready to give up, but Su Ming didn't. "This is not the fish and shrimp, nor the wasp. Using group control on those animals, even if Su Ming is negligent, it won't be a big problem. At most, 1 or 2 will be out of control." But in front of him, there was a large group of snakes, at least 1,000 or 2,000 of which were extremely poisonous. If he relied on himself to control them with his mental power, he would be bitten if he was not careful, and his life would be over. The scene must be chaotic, so that Su Ming could fish in troubled waters and take advantage of the fire. Thinking of this, Su Ming did not hesitate to pour all his mental power into the Tyrannosaurus rex. If the Tyrannosaurus rex attacked just now, it would be full of fighting spirit, and Su Ming might not be able to control it instantly, but now the Tyrannosaurus rex is ready to retreat, just like a party in a war, forced to retreat due to insufficient strength. Although it has not suffered a fatal blow, but its morale will definitely decline. The Tyrannosaurus rex was in such a state at this time, a little depressed. So when Su Ming's huge mental power arrived, the Tyrannosaurus rex was immediately controlled by Su Ming without any warning. "Brother, come on," Su Ming roared in his heart, shouting a line of reactionary officers, commanding the Tyrannosaurus rex to rush into the snake group. This is really a big deal. Thousands of snakes gathered in a few dozen square meters. The density can be imagined. They were almost densely packed one next to another, just like a nest of maggots. It was so scary to look at it. People who have used the squat toilet in the past must have seen this kind of scene. Su Ming had seen it when he was a child. Not only had he seen it, but he had also thrown stones at it. Sometimes when he was bored in the squat toilet, he would light a piece of paper and throw it in. The current situation is almost like this. The big snake rushed into the snake group like a shit stirrer, dancing its slender and powerful body wildly without any rules, and lashed and collided with the surrounding snakes. The big snake was originally ready to retreat, and the surrounding snakes also relaxed their guard and prepared to leave. At this time, the big snake suddenly attacked, and the snake group was caught off guard. The wetland was splashing with water, the golden snakes were dancing wildly, and the smaller snakes were whipped away by the body and tail of the Tyrannosaurus rex in groups, and the larger snakes were also in a mess. At this moment, the Tyrannosaurus showed its power, using its size advantage and surprise attack to completely gain the upper hand. Huff, huff. Su Ming was of course very happy to see the situation, but the second senior brother was on the side, making a dissatisfied huffing sound, as if he couldn't stand the Tyrannosaurus being in the limelight. Well? Have you suffered from it before? Su Ming couldn't help but look at the second senior brother, thinking that you are a coward, you can't even beat a young Tyrannosaurus. The Tyrannosaurus over there had the upper hand, but it was only a matter of a moment, and soon, the situation was reversed again. If it could really rely on its size advantage to fight thousands of people alone, it would have chosen to rush forward instead of retreating without Su Ming's tricks on the side. After suffering a little loss, the various snakes of all sizes around immediately reacted and rushed towards the Tyrannosaurus frantically. In the blink of an eye, the Tyrannosaurus was entangled with countless small snakes, and its body looked like it was swollen, and its movements became slow. Some relatively powerful poisonous snakes coiled around the Tyrannosaurus Rex and opened their mouths to bite it fiercely. Su Ming quickly withdrew his mental power. On the one hand, the Tyrannosaurus Rex was now deep in the enemy group and could not escape. There was no way out. The only way to survive was to fight a bloody battle, so mental control was no longer needed. Second, in terms of fighting skills, Su Ming was definitely not as good as the Tyrannosaurus Rex himself. If he used mental control again, it would not only fail to help, but would cause trouble. It was better to let the Tyrannosaurus Rex perform on its own. Sure enough, after the spiritual power was withdrawn, the Tyrannosaurus Rex managed to turn the situation around a little bit, rolling violently in the wetland, and whipping its long body up and down and left and right. Small snakes were constantly being eaten or thrown away, but more small snakes would immediately rush up, and then continue to be thrown away, and then rush up again. The worst were the fierce venomous snakes. Some of them were strong enough to pierce their fangs into the scales of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, but when the Tyrannosaurus Rex rolled like this, they were in big trouble. The slender fangs were stuck in the scales and all broke with a snap. If a person's teeth were broken alive, it would be painful at most, but it was different for venomous snakes. If their fangs were broken, they would basically die. Even if they didn't die at the time, they would starve to death soon because they had no teeth to hunt, they couldn't eat liquid food or porridge. The Tyrannosaurus was also extremely depressed. After discovering those morels, it crawled out of the deep mountains and has been guarding here for 7 or 8 days. During these 7 or 8 days, it tried more than once to sneakily eat the morels, but every time there was a movement, other snakes would immediately attack it. Before, no matter what, it had the power of a huge body and that little bit of cleverness. Even if it couldn't eat the morels, it could at least escape unscathed. But today, inexplicably, when it was about to leave, it had an impulse to fight with these little snakes that were in the way, just like a passionate young man. You know, as a cold-blooded animal, the Tyrannosaurus has never had such a passionate and impulsive feeling in its life. Don't talk about it, its parents, its parents' parents, its ancestors for 18 generations, thousands of years, have never been impulsive. How could it know that this impulse was not its problem, but a bad guy named Su Ming was secretly making trouble a few dozen meters downwind? Impulse is the devil, and impulse has a price. The battle lasted for more than 20 minutes, almost half an hour, and finally came to an end slowly. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 240. Human beings call others lazy, often saying like a dead snake. This is the scene in the wetland, with half-dead snakes of various sizes everywhere. Snakes of all sizes lay there limp and motionless. Su Ming used his spiritual power to test the snakes. In fact, most of the snakes were not fatally injured. A small number of venomous snakes had their fangs broken and would not die for a while. It's just that these snakes were originally in hibernation, and all aspects of their body functions were at a low level. After such a battle, they almost exhausted their strength. The worst thing is actually the overlord python. This guy made a fuss, and several times he almost lost his energy. Su Ming saw the opportunity and sent a burst of mental power to help it heal its injuries and replenish its strength. Otherwise, it would have been killed by the snakes long ago, and it would have been impossible to achieve the current results. With the backing of mental power, the overlord python was like a perpetual motion machine, completely clearing the area. Most of the poisonous snakes in the wetland were unable to fight anymore. Even in the entire wild boar house, there were only a few that could pose a threat to Su Ming. The snake died, but the overlord python also suffered serious injuries in the battle and had been relying on mental power to support it. As soon as Su Ming removed the mental power, the overlord python immediately collapsed there limply. It's like a person who relies entirely on stimulants for support. Once the effects of the drug are over, he immediately becomes a Superman and a coward. Unfortunately, we are only one step away from a piece of delicious morels. There were small wounds all over its body, and all kinds of poisonous fangs were exploded everywhere in the scales. There were at least 400 to 500 poisonous fangs on its 5 to 6 meter long body. In some places, even the scales were damaged. It was torn open, revealing the light red snake meat underneath. With the sound of thunder, I will appear on stage, Su Ming strode towards the wild boar's house. Hai Dongqing endured the food all night long, and now he could finally feast. His wings fluttered, and he rushed over with a gasp, and pecked a half-dead Bungara snake hard. Su Ming said hello to Hai Dongqing and tried his best to choose snakes that were dying. Those who were alive might still be useful to him in the future. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The wild boar's enthusiasm was not at all inferior to that of Hai Dongqing, and he spread his hooves and roared before charging forward. These guys are depressing enough. They used to live a good life here, drinking mountain springs, eating various herbal Ganoderma lucidum, and a large field of delicious morels that were about to mature. They lived a happy life like gods. However, sitting at home behind closed doors, misfortune from the sky, such a good place was robbed by a group of snakes. If they are robbed by other animals, the wild boar will feel better mentally. Anyway, these are a group of heartless and rude guys. They don't even care if their cubs are caught and stewed. But it happened that the territory was taken away by snakes. You know, they are known as the natural enemies of snakes. Especially the pig's second son, who was missing one of his balls, rushed up to a large red-chained snake more than 1 meter long with red eyes, stabbed it hard with his fangs, and with a puff, stabbed the red-chained snake in the belly. A big hole. The red-chained snake was only as thick as a child's wrist. With such a big hole, it was almost cut through, and it died instantly. The second pig was still angry. He lowered his head and poked with his fangs, until he stabbed the red-chained snake into a pile of rotten meat. Then he turned around, sat down heavily on it, and crushed it into a pile of meat. Finally, he pooped into the meat and pooped a lot, and then he wagged his little tail with satisfaction. Poor little pig, full of resentment, finally avenged his egg. Wait for me at the water's edge, be careful of snakes, Su Ming warned Su Meng, then rode his second senior brother, carefully wading through the water, towards the center of the wetland. The water in that wetland was actually not deep, only 30 or 40 centimeters, and the shallow part was not even 10 centimeters. With the size of a pig, it was no trouble at all, and we quickly arrived at the morels. A large piece of morels, let alone hundreds of morels, yellow and tender, making people want to take a bite. Among them, a morel mushroom, about the size of half a mineral water bottle, stood out from the crowd and was particularly conspicuous. So big, Su Ming estimated that it weighed at least half a caddy. Fungus plants have low density, small size, and lightweight, especially morels, which are generally only a few tens of grams in size, and 200 to 300 grams is already an exaggeration. Su Ming once heard from Zhao Yun that he and the doctor spent nearly 3 million to buy the black truffle, known as the king of fungi, which only cost more than 200 grams. If the morel in front of me were put up for auction, its value would probably be astonishing. Thinking of this, Su Ming subconsciously wanted to bend down and touch the big morel. As soon as he bent down, many of the half-dead snakes around him actually struggled to raise their heads and stared at Su Ming. The overlord python looked like it was dead just now, but now it raised its head vigorously and spat out a message as if to demonstrate to Su Ming. Probably because it was really out of strength, as soon as the forked red letter vomited out a small section, the overlord python couldn't hold on, and fell slumped into the puddle again. If these snakes were humans, they would be so depressed that they would vomit blood. After guarding them for so long and beating them to death, they almost lost their lives, but others casually picked up the fruits of victory. It's not good for you to do this. Su Ming squatted by the water, stretched out a finger to the snakes and shook it, saying seriously, as a snake, what's the point of you eating these morels? It can't really strengthen your virility, right? What's the point of you nourishing your kidneys? It's just for the sake of talking. But if I sell it, I can get you a lot of better and cheaper food. Even if I don't take it, you have so many snakes to share such a few morels, and the last snake can't even get a bite. On the contrary, I will take it back to plant, and when there is a good harvest in the future, everyone will have something to eat. The snakes really can't do it anymore, lying there powerlessly listening to Su Ming's brainwashing. Su Ming concluded seriously, so, everyone supports my work and lets me take these morels away. In the future, I will not treat you badly. This is a good thing of mutual benefit. As the saying goes, rely on parents at home and rely on friends when going out. Don't you think this is the truth? Snakes know nothing about the truth. It is impossible for them to be brainwashed by Su Ming in a short time. As their physical strength gradually recovered, some snakes even took attacking postures. Su Ming glared and simply used his soul-attaching ability on the snakes that had the strongest intention to resist. Then he took out the realgar powder with a smile and sniffed it under his nose. He used both soft and hard tactics, reasoning, facts, and means, and finally communicated with the spirit power, and finally more than 100 snakes became obedient. Su Ming also used a lot of spirit power to rescue the Tyrannosaurus Rex. This guy was seriously injured. If he was not treated in time, he might really lose his life. Or else it can be said that snakes are indeed spiritual. During the process of being rescued by Su Ming with his spirit power, the Tyrannosaurus Rex gradually gave up its hostility and was even willing to take the initiative to try to communicate with Su Ming. This is probably related to its breed. The Tyrannosaurus Rex is not very aggressive and has a gentle nature. It can even be kept as a pet. In addition to leaving more than 100 venomous snakes and the Tyrannosaurus Rex, most of the remaining snakes, after their physical strength recovered a little, Su Ming simply dispersed them and let them return to their original living area. This number of snakes may be the total number of snakes in the nearby mountains. If they are left in this place or all taken away, the food chain in the nearby mountains will lack the link of snakes in a short period of time, which will cause considerable damage to the biological system. Perhaps in the coming year some kind of animal will flood the mountains, and even cause insect plagues in nearby villages.